All right, everybody. So there's recent debate that Vaush did, friend of mine, friend of the show, on the topic of contraception. I've been covering this topic quite a bit lately. Republicans and conservatives, especially with the rise of the red pill incel stuff recently, have been very anti-contraception. My overall understanding of their arguments and their beliefs is that they believe that contraception gives women the freedom to have non-committal sex. It basically means they won't get married and stay virgins till they get married, and then get married young, which is what they want, right? So it mostly seems to be their perception is that contraception is giving women the freedom to not get married young, and they don't like that because they need there to be lots of women willing to settle for them. So that's my general understanding of what they're mad about and why they want to ban contraceptive rights. And I actually haven't seen a debate where someone's genuinely tried to defend not giving people access to contraception. But apparently now there is one. And I've put off watching this one because, this is pretty relevant to what I've been discussing lately, the Republicans trying to go after contraceptive rights. So let's go ahead and take a look at this debate. It's very, very long, so we're probably going to have to skim it a fair amount, and we're definitely not watching the whole thing, fair warning. But I want to get the gist of it. I want to get the general gist of it. So let's just hop right on in. Oh, look. This little animation.
Believe in yourselves, chat. I muted
That was
myself.
loud.
Hello,
Oh my
hello,
God.
and welcome to yet another episode of WIC TV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to discuss issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. Gang, we got a good one for you today. This debate series is the second in a two-part series sponsored by Rebellion PAC.
This guy looks like Noah Sampson in 10 years. Why does this guy look like literally just washed up Noah Sampson? Look at this guy. Tell me I'm wrong.
Rebellion is a progressive PAC led.
This is Noah Sampson in 10 years, maybe less.
By Brianna Wu, focused on communication and strategic alliances across the political divide. Rebellion believes that we can't solve problems without talking to each other about them, and we strongly support the mission of WIC TV. So here we are, gang. No one here has been paid to be here. No one's been paid to have a position. We're just going to be discussing contraception today. Is it good for our society? Should we legislate it or restrict it through the law and the force of the law? Why or why not? We'll get into it as we go. And I want to start by giving my guests here a brief introduction and a brief opening statement, and then we'll just get into the meat of it. We'll start with Bagels. Go ahead.
Awesome,
Right.
thanks.
Let's see it.
I wrote out some opening comments, but the rest of it should be unscripted off the top.
All right. Let's hear this incel diatribe. I'm ready.
I want to thank WIC for organizing this discussion and giving me the opportunity to talk about this important and interesting topic. I want to thank Eucharist for recommending me to WIC, and I want to thank Vaush for taking the time to talk with me. I was initially hesitant to participate because I'm aware that my positions and arguments about this topic are unpopular. However, in the hope of good faith discussion about an interesting topic and with the advice and support of friends, I'm happy to be here. I should also mention that I'm Roman Catholic and as a result am part of the one last
you are.
and communities who oppose contraception.
Oh, yeah, you are. Oh, I already knew, bro. That's what I would have guessed.
Said I would resist any preconceived judgments, first about my positions on any particular topic, including this one, and second, that my arguments about this topic are simply reducible to a position of irrational faith or contingent upon the demonstration of the existence of God. My positions on this topic are hopefully fundamentally rooted in the exercise of reason according to a virtue ethicist moral framework and a teleological ontology. Both orientations have served as...
So, he's basically just said, you are not allowed to point out that most of my arguments fall back on because God said so, and that's not a fact or reason-based position to hold. So he's basically setting the ground rule of, you can't point out that using religion as the justification for my beliefs is deranged.
Traditions of thought for millennia without contingency upon the previous theological questions I mentioned. I would also say that I take exception to the title of this discussion, insofar as I do not advocate for forced birth or anything of the kind. I understand that clickbait is how you get views on the internet, and I can certainly appreciate a meme. However, I do take discussions about topics like this seriously and genuinely want to find the truth, even if that entails admitting I've made a mistake or am wrong. As a last preliminary, I would also say that I'm incredibly conscious of the fact that this discussion, as far as I understand it, is between three men about a topic that has incredibly intimate impact upon women. I don't think that this means we cannot or should not discuss the topic, but I do think it's important to retain that fact in the back of one's head. There's a level of existential familiarity with contraception that I do not have that is likely extremely important to obtaining the best point of view on this topic in particular. As a result, I will try to restrict my comments to what I do know makes the most sense to me and am persuaded by.
That's at least a nice little virtue signal to throw in there, you know? Like I get it. We're two guys talking about a topic that predominantly is most applicable to women, but like, let's be real. Contraceptive rights are not a women-only thing, like issue, right? The preventing of pregnancy is obviously something that the woman in the scenario, or I guess birthing person, in the scenario would probably be the most concerned about whether or not it's being used, considering that they're the one who has to, you know, create the human being inside their body and then pass it through them. But is it also not a pretty relevant issue for men? Because whether or not the person you're hooking up with is going to give birth to your child on accident is pretty damn relevant to men too, I would say. I don't think this is a woman's only issue by any means.
To state my argument succinctly, I hold that contraception is a particular application of vice against the virtue of charity, or chastity, and as a result is a violation of natural law, specifically as that has to...
Yeah, also many contraceptives have other, like, additional benefits, such as condoms being a very effective way to stop STDs. There are tons of birth control medications, and like I'm pretty sure like older women can take Viagra to help with heart conditions. Isn't that a thing? Like women who have like heart issues can take Viagra. Usually they would be older, and it'll give them like positive outcomes for their heart. I'm almost certain that's a thing.
Do with human sexuality and its telos. Or in other words, contraception is contrary to what makes human sexuality intelligible, coherent, and good as the thing that it is. I would briefly begin by stating something fundamentally obvious, that is, human beings are the kind of animals who make moral judgments. Regardless of how we do so, or the meaning that may or may not be behind our doing so, everyone makes judgments about what is good and bad.
I swear I heard that once. One of the most important
ways we are able to arrive at such judgments is through understanding what the object of our analysis is. In so doing, we consider what the ideal or perfect instantiation of the object would be, and then its function and how well or poorly it attains to that perfection. Those qualities which we identify as useful and effective at drawing a thing in unity with its perfection, we identify as virtues or excellencies, in the Greek arete. This, in a nutshell, is the process of virtue ethics and teleology. We can apply such analysis to everything in reality, including sexuality.
Okay, this guy is against contraceptives because he wants there to be more young women looking to get married young and settle with him. I get it. But could he not, like, do something about his greasy-ass hair? Like, hair management is not that hard. You get in the shower, you hit your head with some hot water and get your hair nice and wet, and you get some conditioner. Or not, I mean, it depends. Like, every, like, other shower, I'll use shampoo, because you don't want to use shampoo every time you wash your hair, or you'll fuck it up. So you use, like, shampoo every other time you wash your hair, and you just lather it up with shampoo, rinse it out with hot water, and then you wet your hair again with cold water. This is the key, okay? You wet your hair again with cold water. Like, ice cold water if you can take it. But, like, cool water if that's all you can handle. Wet your hair with that to cool your hair and your head down, and then take some like really nice moisturizing conditioner and put it on like a dry hand and just like really get that in your hair, like just really get it in there. Just get it in there with your your fingertips and just like spend like 5 minutes just rubbing it into your hair and turn your hair into like a mess of conditioner. Keep that in for the rest of the time you wash the entire rest of your body. Then wash it out with really cold water. Like, wash your hair out with really cold water. and then get out of the shower. That's what I do. And then I always put some conditioner in my hair. Like right now, after I get out of the shower, I always just like put a daub of conditioner in the palm of my hand, rub my hands together, and then just kind of run it through my hair and brush my hair, and eventually my hair dries, and it just generally, yeah, it's leave-in, yeah. It's made for that, but yeah. You can use normal conditioner to do that too. Why does this need to be explained? Because this guy needs it explained to him. He's getting no bitches. That's what enforces his worldview. He needs to know how to wash his hair. Look how greasy it is. I can see it gleaming.
Thus, we can come to understand what sex is, both in particular actuality and in abstract perfection. Then we can turn our minds to sussing out what constitutes what is good and bad with respect to sexuality. In so doing, we identify various qualities or virtues that serve as guideposts to our moral judgments about both particular and general cases.
Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know how to wash their hair, believe me. Like, have you been in public?
Okay, well, thank you. That was quite in-depth, and I'm sure we will get into it in the meat of the discussion. Vaush, you're up.
Yeah, as I suspected, I don't think this conversation is going to be primarily about contraception. It's going to be about morality, chastity, birth rates, human sexuality, and romance. Ultimately, the problem is that when we design doctrines that we use to understand the world and guide our decision-making, a lot of bias goes into the ways in which we construct those doctrines. For example, he talked about sex being an intelligible, coherent, and morally good component of human behavior. The problem is that these loaded terms have been used and misused in so many ways that when I hear it and when I understand what it means in practice, what I think it functionally is PhD philosophy speak for I think these things are good because I think these things are good. There is a virtue that I think is fundamentally good that should be referred to as a driving motivator for human behavior in society, which is freedom. I think people should have the freedom to make the choices that they want. The idea that the state should be used to restrict people's freedoms because of an abstract belief in the necessary coherence of human sexual activity ignores the fact that it has never been coherent. There has never been a point in time where humans lived in perfect accordance with natural law because natural law does not exist. If you go back far enough in human history, you will see behavior which is, by today's standards, certainly for a modern conservative, incoherent and degenerate. There is no point in time you could arrive at by which people would not be behaving by these standards. There's no ideal past.
He's completely right, and he's hitting the nail on the head. What Christians and people like this guy pretend like they believe is this idea that there is a divinely ordained truth to the universe. That humans, when they discover something or invent something, are essentially uncovering, because everything that happens is God's intent. And so we aren't creating anything new. We aren't discovering anything new. We are just uncovering things that God left there for us, effectively, is the idea that he's trying to push. And that humans have just developed a way of understanding what God wants us to do and what is morally right on a fundamental level. While what Vaush is arguing very correctly is that humans are animals, and we evolved higher intelligence and higher capacity for movement and posable tool use than other animals. And because of that, we outbred everything else. We outkilled it. We became the top species. We got smart enough to invent language to communicate. That made us even better. And humans' ability to adapt to things and continuously learn to do new things to get through new trials is what has propelled our species forward, not some sort of divine intelligence. And the moral beliefs that we hold are nothing other than moral constructs that we've developed in order to best help our society continue forward. It used to be, a few hundred years ago, rape was totally legal. It was just totally legal. But somewhere down the road, we figured out, we should probably not allow that, you know? We probably shouldn't allow that. A whole lot of things like that all originate just from us figuring out it'd be best if we just stopped doing this. And the people who figured out it'd be best if we just stopped doing this regressive, bad thing are usually the progressives of that time who end up getting denigrated by the chuds of that time for daring to hope for a better future. And they have, people who've hoped for a better future through all of human history have been called utopian.
No platonic ideal of what we're meant to do when having sex or when engaging in relationships with other people. We have to make these judgments based on modern understandings of what is and isn't harm on an interpersonal level. And I think there's a great deal of harm in both an immediate and in a sort of a missed opportunity sense when we talk about the functional consequence of banning contraception which would be the end to casual sex. And
yeah, killing's a good example. Like, killing happened left and right. Hell, you can even look at the Bible and pull from that if you're a Christian. Like, the first murder happens between two humans in, like, ancient fucking, like, villager times or whatever, right? And like, everybody's killing each other after that point. So it's like, we've kind of developed the idea that, maybe we shouldn't just kill. Maybe we should even have a social stigma against killing instead of, like, glorifying killers like we did in the old days in gladiatorial arenas and whatnot. These are social ideas that are what old school conservatives, and by old school I mean like ancient Roman conservatives, would call the pussification of a society, okay? But what it really is the advancement of society to a state that you should be glad you were born into, because if you were born any earlier, you would be born into a worse world, pretty much all around, other than maybe like climate change and nature.
Reproductive freedom for women. Those are real harms. They exist really and truly and functionally. They hurt people in material ways that can be quantified. Not so with this abstract notion of a coherent idea of sexuality.
Okay, and with that, I guess we will open up with my first question to both of you. Moment. Okay, NBC News has reported an avalanche of conservative influencers on social media who are promoting messages that are anti-birth control. These social media influencers include Tim Pool, Ben Shapiro, Steve Bannon, etc. Now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned,
Yep.
is access to contraception the next legislative goal for these individuals to attack or block? And is that a good thing? I'll let you go first, Bagels. What do you think?
Yeah, so I would say from the outset that it's not necessarily my position that we should entirely ban contraceptives in the sense that
safe.
Nobody could ever use them or anything, or it's like it created some sort of black market or anything like that. I will say that because of the way in which contraceptives pervert, I would say, the concept of sexuality more broadly, we should limit and reimagine how we think about them, because I think that contraceptives lead to a culture of contraception, which is opposition to life, or a culture of death, and that is fundamentally detrimental to human happiness more broadly. So I would be in favor of limitations of contraceptives.
This guy's actually insane.
In terms of practical, I mean, not using them for basically any other purpose other than sort of medical necessity. So if there's some sort of harm that would otherwise unable to be prevented, then we should.
Yeah, obviously we would have it for medical necessity. I don't think, like I feel like there'd be a pretty low chance of even Republicans being able to get contraceptives that have uses in other medical applications completely banned from any use, no matter the scenario. But this is the same cop-out Republicans use on abortion. Recently I saw, this was funny, I saw this on Vaush's subreddit the other day, and it was Shoe on Head talking about how no one in their right mind should be in favor of a 9-month abortion. Like a month 8 or 9 abortion. And it was like, but she specified 9. And like, so we're talking like weeks or days up until birth. And it's like, does nobody having this conversation not know that abortions don't happen that late? Like, literally, it would be more dangerous to have the abortion. They just induce labor. They just, like, if you go in 9 months pregnant to have an abortion, they're just going to say, You'll die if we try to give you the abortion. The procedure's way too dangerous at this point. It's safer to just induce an early birth and do everything we can to save the baby. I'm sorry, it's just too late into the pregnancy. That's how that goes, because it's literally like no one would want to abort the baby that late in either, because of what that entails for them, by the way. Republicans love talking about what later term abortions are like. That's like 7 months in, 6 months in. Can you imagine... and like 5 months in, can you imagine like a 9 month in going through that process where they do the sawing and shit? No, they couldn't do that. They just induce labor. Because at 9 months, there is actually pretty much a person in there. Like, obviously, eggs, milk, and cake batter are not a cake. But the cake in the oven 2 minutes before the oven dings and you take it out to eat is a cake. Even though it's still got 2 minutes left till it's done. That is still a cake. You would still call that a cake. In that same way that, like, the 9-month pregnancy is still... There's a baby in there at that point. And so they just induce birth. Like, there's a variety of reasons why they induce birth. And I see Republicans talking about it like that is a thing that exists. Like... 9-month abortions are a thing that exists. They're not. They're like they just aren't a thing that is real. They are a thing made up by Republicans. So yeah,
you would be able to use contraceptives, but otherwise, just being able to have them for whatever reason at all, or even to do something like having sort of casual sex, as Vaush put it, I think is ultimately detrimental to what sex fundamentally is and what it's for.
Okay.
So either this guy's going to argue sex is for purely the act of creating new life, or sex is for both purely the act of creating new life and for building a stronger bond of intimacy with your life partner. So no like convenient friend hookups or anything like that. This has got to be somebody that you want to spend your life with, like the no sex till marriage shit.
Well, this is an open discussion, so go ahead, gang.
Oh, happily.
Discuss.
See, the Republicans are gunning for it. After the revocation of Roe v. Wade, Clarence Thomas wrote that the court should consider doing the same for Griswold versus Connecticut, which is the Supreme Court precedent that establishes a right to contraception. We do know for a fact that Republican politicians and pundits and lobbying groups are gearing up for it. The reason they're gearing up for it, of course, is because it's in line with the conservative agenda. It's a revocation of women's rights, a day of trad wives, of barefoot pregnant women who can't work a job. It's a social aim that they're gunning for. But I need to, Bagel, I need to ask. I mean, you say it perverts, that it's a death cult. This is silly. And you know this, right? Not wanting to produce a baby is...
It's a death cult for him. Like for like the average, not average, but for like the most bogged down of incel dudes, they see modern day dating as a death cult, because it's for, they see it as a dynamic where all, like 1% of guys are getting 90% of women, and the other 10% are going for like the next 1% of guys. And so like in their worldview, 98% of guys are like scrounging for scraps in regards to dating. And that if the dating world continues on this way and women are still allowed to have sex with guys casually that they choose to without any responsibility of potentially getting pregnant, then they will literally end up dying alone or by suicide, or they'll do what's called lay down and rot. It's a very common incel phrase when they literally just like give up and decide they're just gonna like kill themselves. So yeah, to them, modern day dating is a death cult because they can't get laid. And so they fall to this like Christ pill. It's now called the Christ pill, but back in the day it was called the white pill. You would go from taking the red pill to the black pill, and then you would take the white pill. And the white pill would be Christianity. The meme was like, you took the, like, you'd be a normie. You took your blue-pilled normie, right? And then you take the red pill, and you're like watching Jordan Peterson and stuff, and you're based now. But then you'd realize that truly women are all evil whores, and they're all awful and evil. And then you take the black pill, and now you're just like fully like doomer, like you know the evil, dark truth of reality. And then comes along the white pill or the Christ pill, and then you become a born-again Christian, and you start peddling this faith nonsense as a way of like filling the hole in your soul that you made from like years and years of browsing incel subreddits or whatever. That is this guy's life story. I know it better than he does.
Not the same as death. There's nothing to die. There is no death. Nothing lived, so nothing can die. You might as well say that a society in which every woman is not pregnant at all times is a death society, because there are potential lives that could be made that are not being made. I mean, every masturbation session then is, well, you might believe that. Every masturbation session then would be
this guy's a no-fapper. Yep.
Worship
He
of death,
nodded.
because you're not creating life with the act. And this is silly. People have sex for a number of reasons, and a great deal of it, especially these days, is because it feels good. Why not let...
Hey, chat, where do you think the sperm cells in your balls go if you don't nut them out? They die, and your body consumes them, and they exit your body as waste. They're leaving one way or the other. Like semen retention, like the semen doesn't build up in your body like indefinitely, you know, right? Like your body like recycles it like every 48 hours or something like that. So the semen retention thing is literally pseudoscience for anybody who's wondering. Like the science that actually backs up nofap is for sex addicts and porn addicts who spend a unhealthy amount of time jacking off. And when they stop doing that, they then start picking up other hobbies and activities in that time that was otherwise taken up by watching porn. And that improves their lives and makes them happier and healthier. Not necessarily the lack of ever jacking off. And this is the big problem with no-fappers. No-fappers and porn addicts have a disease. The CDC and every other medical institution in the entire world recognizes addiction as a disease. Conservatives hate this idea because they hate the idea of addicts having not having 100 million% blame and agency in being addicted and doing drugs and whatever happens to them. They want it to be all their fault, so no help can be justified giving to them. But in truth, every medical institution at this point recognizes addiction as a disease. Porn addiction and sex addiction are diseases. They are. The people who have them might have developed porn addiction or sex addiction, or they might have like just always had it, like ingrained in them from birth. It's impossible to know. But these guys don't know a reality in which one can healthfully engage with porn and sex. Like porn addicts and like sex addicts cannot conceive the mindset or the reality of somebody who has a healthy relationship with sex or porn. It's either all into an unhealthy amount or all out. They either have to be cold turkey clean or they're fully relapsed into like jacking off all day, seeking out sex all day, because they have a disease and they need to get like actual psychological help more likely than not. It's not something that just not jacking off or having sex and doing semen retention is going to help them with. It's a good Band-Aid solution, but there is no doubt an underlying problem connected to that. And this is why you see so many no-fappers acting as though, like, they accuse people of having porn addiction. They describe their experience with porn addiction as though that must be your experience too, because they cannot conceive that anybody else could have had a different experience with sex and porn, a healthier one at that.
Them feel good.
Yeah, so I would say to deal with the first thing or the last thing first, the why not just let them feel good. I don't believe that pleasure is...
Zan, it's actually bad for you not to come semi-regularly if you're a person with a prostate. That's true, but your body takes care of it for you. If you don't come often enough, you'll just have a wet dream. That's why those happen. If you ever like wake up and you just like nutted in your sleep, it's because you don't nut enough while you're awake. If like your prostate actually needs to clear seminal fluid, it'll just do it in your sleep. Like involuntarily. A nocturnal emission, yeah. I've never had that happen, but apparently that's why it happens. I guess I keep my balls nice and empty.
Some sort of ultimate criterion or has any sort of privileged status in relation to other considerations, and it needs to be weighed accordingly. And so the maximizing of pleasure, I would say, for a lot of reasons that go beyond the scope of this discussion, is not sort of the best way in which to live one's life. And again, there's a lot of arguments about that, but that's a separate discussion. Now, with respect to contraceptives specifically, the idea that we have adopted a technology which is a good thing in its sort of what I would regard its appropriate usage, which is sort of correcting, medical issues that particularly women encounter surrounding reproductive health, then in those uses it would be good. When it becomes an issue is when it's extrapolated out into this broad culture of
Extrapolated? That's how he just pronounced extrapolated.
People just having sex for no other reason, just to have sex or have pleasure.
Why not? Birth control exists.
That is the core of it. They think that having sex for fun is bad. Like you have a friend with benefits and you bang every once in a while, like, because it's fun. That's bad to this guy. Like, you shouldn't be allowed to do that without the extreme risk of getting your friend pregnant. Like, that's the reality these people want you to live in. No fun allowed.
Controlled birth.
Sure. So the idea that I mentioned in my previous opening statement was that each thing sort of has a purpose. It has, like, in order to make a determination about what is good or bad about it, both abstractly in general, but then also in a particular instantiation, one has to. This is just how we go about doing moral analysis.
Well, wait, no, it's not, because then somebody has to go about deciding the purpose, and that seems to me like a arbitrary process.
No. So the way that we rationally approach determining whether something is good or bad, rather than just willfully saying, "Oh, this is good and I like this," but to have thought behind it, we have to have some sort of analysis, and there's a variety of different ways in which we do that. But what they all at least share is
what these people try to do is they're trying to what's the word for it? Pseudo-intellectualize anti-freedom. They are trying to make it sound like a position that does nothing but argue in favor of taking happily enjoyed freedom from people into this, like, pseudo-intellectual debate about whether or not it's, like, ethical or not. Virtue ethics is cringe. Yeah, I think of all forms of philosophy discussion, virtue ethics is the most pointless and annoying. The only conversation that one can have with somebody like this is one in which you are making fun of them or going over to a debate they had with somebody and deconstructing everything they say piece by piece, which is mostly the point of this. This is less so a debate reaction. Like, I'm less so here for Vaush's arguments, and I'm more so here for this guy's arguments. I want to take apart his arguments and explain why the right is so against contraception, why they're going to be going after it soon, though it is still entertaining in and of itself. But you'll notice I paused a lot because I mostly want to respond to this guy.
This idea that you have to understand what it is that you're talking about.
I disagree.
And
like, this is a hairbrush, right?
Yeah.
I use it for my beard. But if, I don't know, it got buried in the dirt, and got found 1,000 years from now, petrified wood, and somebody thought that it was, I don't know, really good for clobbering people. The initial purpose of this item is irrelevant to the utility that it provides to those who use it. I mean, what is the purpose of an item?
I think stick is the best example. Like, imagine the journey of a stick, okay? Guy picks it up, starts walking through the woods. All right, it's a walking stick now. Really cool. Eventually, the guy falls down and drops the stick and can't find it. Aw, damn. Couple seasons pass. Someone comes by, picks it up, and decides it's, a good stick, and decides to sharpen it into a spear. Now it's a spear, but it's still a stick. It's just got a sharpened end. He uses it a couple times. It breaks. So now it's just it's just back to being a normal stick again with a broken end. Drop it. Someone comes along and thinks, this would make a good broom. Wraps some wicker on the end, and now it's a broom. Like, we just kind of came up with names for things. And hell, you don't even have to transform the thing. One person could see it as a pull-up bar, right? They could put the stick between two branches and make it a pull-up bar. One person could see it as a walking stick. One person could see it as a bat for playing a game of baseball in the woods with rocks, just a little makeshift game. Someone could see it as a weapon for defending themselves. Like, yeah, obviously, like, none of this stuff is set in stone.
Yeah. A water bottle holds water. Sure, it's marketed as a water bottle. If it held juice, would it become worthless? If it was used as a decorative piece, would it become useless? I don't understand this, because it's like the platonic ideal thing, but you get to decide the platonic ideal. Well, a thing is bad because it doesn't match up with your estimation of what it should be. But truth is,
Sure.
I mean, I don't care what you think sex should be. If it causes pleasure, and pleasure is happiness. I mean, they don't overlap perfectly, certainly, but people do get happy when they have sex.
Yep.
Generally speaking, if we're talking
Same.
about stuff that makes people happier, that
Big fan.
maximizes or at least improves human happiness, but it shouldn't be done because there's some abstract concept of what it should be and it doesn't match up with that. I mean, how does that fit? We could do that with anything.
Yeah, so I would push back on you saying that people just arbitrarily decide. Again, which sort of I maintained is
Bath, you cannot stop spitting this virulent hatred in my chat right now. You are a bad take machine. The Iron Giant always was, and will always be a hero.
the idea that when we're out living life, we observe things, and we come to just understand what they are at least are generally for. For the example of the hairbrush or the water bottle that you mentioned, yes, it can be used for other sorts of things, but what its sort of primary function or the reason it was created and designed was for holding, in the case of the water bottle, was holding liquid.
What about a stick? Wait, does that mean that a stick, which came from a branch of a tree, is actually a branch? Because its original creation, as it is recognizable, was for the purpose of distributing leaves throughout the canopy of the tree. So a stick is a branch because that was what it was originally made for. And so a walking stick is also a branch because that was what it was originally made for. The spear is also a branch because that's what it was originally made for. This is a stupid line of logic, okay? It's a very stupid line of logic. It's a very dumb line of logic, chat.
Generally, is what you could say, and to say that it has to be water as opposed to juice or something else like that is just sort of semantics. To a certain extent, it's trivial.
Who cares what it was designed for?
That's how you determine what a thing is. So like when you're just sort of observing it. So basically all forms of sort of rational thought process, whether it's science to philosophy to
Listen, I'm trying not to get you guys reeing at me today.
literature, literally anything. Whenever you're exercising your rational faculty, which everybody has, you're doing this. You're identifying things and establishing, at the very least. I mean, you're doing a whole lot of things, but at the very least, what you are doing is identifying what a thing is, and then the question that is begged is what is it for?
But the uses of things change. In language, that's a terrible example. Language changes all the time. The words, the prepositions, the structure, the syntax we use today would have been unidentifiable 500 years ago. But there's nothing fundamentally wrong with how we speak today. In fact, our language has only gotten more complicated.
Okay, this is kind of getting off the topic, so we're going to skip ahead to, does casual sex cause harm? This is more in line with what I'm interested in hearing from this debate. Remember, this is literally 2.5 hours long. We can't watch the whole thing. So we're watching the more relevant to the topic parts of the debate.
Do you think that casual sex causes harm? And in what ways?
Oh, okay, yeah, I see. Yes, so casual sex causes harm insofar as it. So again,
All right,
when we
explain.
can identify a thing as what it is, and then sort of secondarily as what it's for, we can then determine.
He's just going to explain how casual sex goes against his set of virtue ethics. He's not going to explain any actual, like, real-world way in which casual sex necessarily causes harm. And if he can list any examples of how casual sex can cause harm, it's casual sex without contraceptives. Contraceptives make every form of casual sex safer and better if allowed to be used. There's just, like, every single issue you could have with it is helped by having contraceptives. So banning it would be, or restricting it in any way would be the opposite of solving any problem he could try to bring up.
What is good or bad about it, sort of abstractly, but then also in particular. And so the idea that you can have casual sex that is sex without any sort of connection to its fundamental purpose of procreation and sort of a union between two people
Yep, told
means
ya.
then, and a significant union, not just something that's sort of trivial, but something that's significant. There's an expression of love or commitment or whatever else. All the things that we have historically and still to this day.
I mean, it can be an expression of I think your titties are hot. Like there's like a meaningful expression behind casual sex. Like it could be like, damn, that ass is fire. That could be the meaningful expression. Yeah, an expression of lust. That's an expression of feeling and connection. He thinks it's sinful, but
It takes sex to mean. Whenever those things are lost, that contributes to getting away from the purpose of sex, which inevitably
you're
does.
missing the harm standard.
I may be too internet brain, but when I hear this shit, I always think they have a pregnancy kink. Oh no, a lot of these people have a breeding kink, but it's mostly the women. It's mostly the women that have the breeding kink.
You're doing the purpose thing again.
No, because and so this is where there's a connection, right? So when we identify what a thing is for, the virtues tell us how good or bad they are at attaining to that perfection.
I don't respect your
And
definition of what sex is for. Like I think that your definition of what sex is for is highly emotionally charged. It might as well come right out of scripture. If you're having casual sex, the purpose of that sex might just be to get your nut off. That's the purpose. That's the purpose that I imbue into the action. Much in the same way that a walk can have the purpose of a brief jump.
Yeah, so he'll try to argue, yeah, but we know that every animal species, they have sex, and that creates more life. Well, no, they're asexually reproducing species. It's always been a thing. There are also hermaphroditic species that can change their sex on demand in order to meet the need to reproduce. On top of that, masturbation has been well documented in nature, so it's not a human-only thing. So if you're trying to argue that humans and nature have this thing in common about sexual reproduction, so that must be what it's meant to do, then you must also accept that our reproductive organs are also made for masturbation. You could also argue, just logically speaking, you can't say any part of our body only has one singular function. It's our body. It's made to do whatever we need it to at a given time, right? Or whatever we want it to do at a given time. For example, our mouths weren't made for talking. Our vocal cords weren't really made for talking. Well, okay, those were made for talking because we evolved those up after a lot of... But our mouths weren't made for talking. Our mouths were made for eating. And then we just kind of made them for talking. So we gave an additional purpose to a part of our body that only had a couple, like breathing and eating. So this logic that there is a specific thing that a part of your body or a certain function of your body is meant to do and meant to do only is very, very stupid and falls apart if you think about it long enough for even half a second.
About town or a long hike, it's my decision.
I mean, that's certainly trivial and shallow, though, right? Because it's plainly not.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite is whenever you get bonobos. This is actually a really good study they did. Not necessarily what you're talking about, Logan Menchaca, but pretty close. I believe it was bonobos. A bunch of scientists did a study where they rewarded bonobo apes, I believe they were, with grapes and other certain fruits that are known to be more liked by bonobos, depending on completing certain tasks. The goal was to introduce an economy to the apes, right? They gave them money, some sort of stand-in for money, and then they would have to exchange it for the food, right? And within a week, the female bonobo apes developed prostitution. They would accept money in exchange for sex. And not only that, but some of them would charge more than others. They would undercut each other because they could recognize the value in getting more volume instead of a higher yield of money per bone. And on top of that, the male monkeys had a certain standard for how much they were willing to pay depending on the female ape. They would literally be shallow and say, "Oh no, you are not worth that much. You gotta be, you can't drop your prices below whatever." Like they would actually like bargain. And there was like a tier list among the bonobos of what the most desirable like bonobo prostitute was. So in nature, this isn't nature, this isn't captivity, but with animals even, if you introduce the stimuli, the resources to create it, they will develop the same type of social structures in a much more, proto way that we have.
The case that you determine.
Plainly not. So you're doing it again. You keep referring to matters of intuition. No, it's not plainly not. Any action.
It's not a matter of intuition.
Any
it's a matter
social
of rational
bond,
observation.
like a hug with somebody, can have many meanings and purposes depending on what you're trying to do. We were talking about a harm standard, but we've gone back now to this. Well, I think that sex is supposed to be about. Well, I don't. I don't think that at all.
Right.
In fact, and you didn't really have a response for the fact that I think by a fair estimation, the majority of sexual acts committed between humans, not just a majority, I mean the vast majority, were not purposefully to bring about children.
Yeah, and that is also why we know 100% that prostitution is the world's oldest profession. Or I guess escorting would be the more PC term used nowadays. But I mean, we're talking like we're talking about prostitution, not escorting. So like, yeah, when you can like introduce the stimuli into an environment and like apes will do it, and it's like the first job they come up with is prostitution, you can safely say, yeah, humans probably came up with the concept of prostitution first. And I completely believe that. Like, you 100% know some, like, lady human monkey person millions of years ago figured out, wait, the male monkey people are way more horny than the female monkey people. I bet they'd give me food in exchange for sex. And then made that their way of getting by. You know that came about, like, at the start of human history. How do we introduce live streaming to apes? They'll take our jobs. If we introduce monkeys to live streaming, there will not be a single human live streamer making a living. If you could just go watch a monkey live stream instead.
So I would push back on that, but to get to the first thing about the harm. So what I'm trying to say is that the virtues and the perfection are what define what is harmful or beneficial, right? So the whole point is that by being virtuous, by attaining to a perfection as it's been identified, not through the expression of will, but through the observation of the thing and the and sort of rational analysis of what that thing is, one is able. There's happiness or goodness.
Okay, I've got this on like 1.3 times speed, and he's still stuttering and talking too slow for it to be bearable. Do you guys understand? I feel like we've seen enough. Like, unironically, I think we've seen enough of this guy's arguments. Do you guys understand what I mean when I talk about how the right, the ones that are trying to go after contraception, and of course they are going to be going after contraception legally, and your right to, have access to it, they're driven by nothing other than a fear that women are given more and more freedom to not settle each day, and they're trying to take that freedom away from women. It's why they rail against modern feminism, where it's all about, and they go against movies where there's female characters, where the idea is that they don't need to be in a relationship to be a fulfilled person, because they want young women, particularly little girls, as we saw in that recent anti-Barbie video. We watched an anti-SJW video, like it was like a random critical drinker, no bullshit, quartering knockoff channel. Made a video about the Barbie movie being woke and bad and awful and the worst movie he's ever seen. And he says he's horrified that this "I don't need a relationship" message will be seen by, and I quote, little girls. I'll let you do with that information what you will. What I'm safe, what I'm comfortable saying, what I feel safe to say, is that these people are desperately terrified that women each day are getting more freedom to live their lives like men have had the freedom to do for a very long time. And if women have the same freedom to exist in our society and live their lives like men do, then these low-grade dudes are pretty much unless they decide to actually put some real effort into improving themselves, not just on the physical level, not just becoming a cringy, like dorky douchebag gym bro, but actually getting therapy, getting to the root of your mental problems and personality issues, and genuinely changing for the better as a person. That is what these people need most. More than a shower, more than a visit to the gym, they need therapy and some serious introspection about their problems, their personality flaws, and a reevaluation of who they are as a person. That is genuinely the best advice I can give to the vast majority of incels. That'll help you more, honestly, than going to the gym or showering everywhere. I mean, you should shower and go to the gym, but, like, first you need to focus on you, like the actual you in your noggin being, like, not that great of a person, most likely. So look at that, evaluate whether or not you would want to be friends with you. Figure that out. Figure out whether or not the average woman would want to be friends with you. And if that's not the case, then maybe you're the problem and not all women. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this segment. I feel like it was a pretty good one.